Dr. Usman Chohan, who is a leading economist, joins us online. Usman, thank you very much to have joined us, and congratulations on the unveiling of your book very recently. Nevertheless, let's come to our topic, and that is the talks between the United States and China, whether it be Vice Premier Liu He and U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and their video call, whether it be Anthony Blinken and Wang Yi, who are to meet on the sidelines of a regional conference in Bali this week. How important are these talks as far as A, the current tensions between the two countries are concerned, B, the regional situation is concerned?
Important questions. Thank you for posing them. The reason is contact between both countries at the highest level, overtly through summits and seminars, had come down to a very, very low and minimal extent during the Trump administration, during the pandemic, when global coordination was most required. It is a good step that both sides are taking to start to do high-profile engagements that actually benefit countries like ours, because the challenges that we face in the world today require coordination from all countries, but especially these two. Like, for example, on the inflation and supply chain issue, like with macroeconomic coordination, you won't be able to do this single-handedly, and I think the United States is beginning to realize that pushing China away was not a good plan to begin with.
All right, now Joe Biden is considering lifting some tariffs as far as imports from China to try and ease this soaring inflation is concerned. Will this help?
It absolutely will help, because these sorts of protectionist measures were taken by the United States under the accusational pretext that China was engaging in unfair trade practices. This is because China has had for a very long time, I mean 25 years plus, a trade surplus and has been accumulating US dollars and has created a trade network around the world by which it accumulates surpluses that was fine when the US was aiming to integrate China into the global economy after the WTO agreement in 2001. Now the situation they felt was different. They felt that China is well on its way to surpassing the United States economically, and so giving a booster through American cooperation would ultimately, they felt, undermine their interests. And once these protectionist tariff-type measures were instated, it increased the cost of consumption and imports for the United States as well as for other countries. So when you have a supply chain crisis, you have to think a bit more pragmatically, and so the ideology pushing that protectionism, which is against the free market ideology that the United States always promotes, you have to go against that and finally recognize the pragmatic realities we face.
When you talk of pragmatic realities, Usman, and you talk about the supply chain issues that is engulfing the world, including these two important countries, do you feel both of them together can carve out some kind of a mechanism for themselves and for the world?
Absolutely. The reason is because these two countries had proactive dialogue frequently at the highest level prior to the Trump administration, and it did help to set a valuable course. And if you recall, go back to those times, 2010s and the 2000s, things were going quite well, barring the US financial crisis, which China did fine in. Now it is very much up to China to assist America in realizing its economic stability. Why? Because its role in international trade is so central now that without China's willing and forthcoming cooperation, you won't be able to achieve it. For example, out of the world's largest ports, 7 out of the largest 10 of the world's ports in terms of trade volume are in China, including the largest one, the port of Shanghai. And because of COVID, in April, they shut all of Shanghai down, including the port, which meant, just imagine the repercussions for supply chains when the largest port on earth is shut down for a month. America cannot deal with that on its own. It has to get China on board.
All right. When you say America needs to get China on board, there's also another factor on which both countries need to have some kind of consensus. That concerns the global energy prices, which are increasing with every passing day, and also because of the Russia-Ukraine war at present. Now, this and the supply chain, the food crisis, and the fact that we are hearing reports of huge quantities of wheat that are not being led to, as far as the different areas of the world are concerned. So that leads to a certain food crisis, ladies and gentlemen, and that creates an imbalance as far as not only the distribution of food and commodities and supply chains are concerned, but also leads to a dearth of food. across the world and also in the developed countries, whereas the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it doesn't seem to have any kind of an end. Nevertheless, the talks between the US and China seem to go in the right direction, and some kind of hope is emerging out of those. Usman, when it comes to global energy prices and other issues that engulf the world because of the Ukraine-Russia war, and also the food crisis, and also the fact that we are hearing reports of huge grains of wheat that are not being led to other countries because of this current war situation. Can China help? Because we know that China is not opposing Russia, and China has more friendly nature of relations with Russia. Do you feel it can somehow convince Russia? Can the US on its side work with the European Union so as to convince Ukraine? Can we maybe, let's say this as a possibility, come towards some kind of a negotiated solution?
This is difficult to comment on because things are still in flux, and I don't see a resolution to the conflict in sight, but I do hope for the best for both countries, particularly the suffering of the Ukrainian people. But China does have good relations with Russia, and China is integrated into the global economy's trade aspect like no other country, which means that it doesn't need to do any diplomacy or persuade anybody, but if it plays its role as a productive economic force that works, and it does, especially with Pakistan, then that is already a good sign for the world economy. It is actually up to the United States to stop trying to hamstring a natural economic development, which is happening not just because China trades with the world, but because it's developing its internal market so effectively. A consumer base of 1 billion people, it's enormous. And so even if China doesn't play diplomacy, it still is a very important and valuable member of the international commercial system.
Where does that leave the global energy crisis? Can both countries find some solution?
It's unfortunate that right now there is a lot of competition for the energy supplies as they stand. For example, you and I consuming gas in Pakistan get it from the Gulf, and that is not where Europe would normally get it. They would get it from pipelines. But the pipelines, because of the rift between Russia and the EU, they are trying to move away from Russian gas, which means that they're bidding for the gas that usually comes to Asia. That means that the gas is going up. And because knowing this, gas has gone up very high, just like oil, which means that the third alternative, which is non-renewable, is coal. And it's very tragic for me personally to know that coal is now going to be used far more frequently when we're trying to resolve things like the global climate change.
So environmental pollution comes back with a bang.
With a bang, and coal has been, to be honest, it has been the biggest driver of China's development and many other countries. But to try to wean us off coal, you can't also have a gas problem and an oil problem, and that's why the global energy markets are a real mess right now for us here, importers of energy.
All right. Now, the U.S. Treasury Department has said that Yellen and Liu, of course, this meeting that was held between the two sides, discuss macroeconomic and financial developments in the United States as far as China, B, the global economic outlook amid rising commodity prices and food security challenges. I'd like to understand your point of view on the microeconomic and financial developments as far as the US and China are concerned. Is there any similarity of views in your point of view? And if there is a divergence, do you feel something can be done about it?
Yes, that's an excellent way to put it. There is a divergence of views, but there's a commonality of interest, because the U.S. has been a net deficit, has a current account deficit, and it's been printing dollars and exchanging that for goods produced in China, and China has then used that to invest into treasuries or to stack up on US dollars. So they have a mutual interest in maintaining some stability in the dollar and in the trade flows, you see. So the problem is now, with inflation being high, the real yield on the US Treasury is negative, which is to say that whatever the Treasury is supposed to pay in interest for its instruments, that is a negative number when you factor in how expensive things are becoming. And that's why bringing inflation down is a very good idea for bonds. Otherwise, if you have a bad global economy, which we do, and you also have high inflation, then you have no choice but to go into cash, and that is not productive. So cash just sits on itself. Instead, you want to have at least inflation come down. Even if the global economy is weak, you would be able to get a positive yield on government bonds, and the US Treasury issues those bonds, so they would be happy with that.
That is true, Usman, and let's hope that some kind of a negotiated solution comes out of this meet, and also Anthony Blinken and Wang Yi, who are going to meet on the sidelines of the regional conference in Bali this week. Let's hope for the best. And with that, we come to an end of today's news. Allah Hafiz.